Hi, I'm Dan Faulkner, CEO of SmartBear,
I'm Kelly Wenzel, CMO of SmartBear.
and this is From the BearQ. We've been talking about how AI coding has really sped up the creation of software, but quality's not keeping up. What data do we have to feed into that conversation?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We just conducted primary research. We went out and talked to software quality and testing leadership professionals, and we asked what impact is it having? And 70% of the respondents said that quality is already degrading as a result of AI-generated code. And so this is definitely having an impact. While the process to develop the code and generate the code has sped up, you're now in days instead of months, what's happening is it's essentially piling up, and it's creating this really just an unbearable trade-off for teams. Okay, yes, you've been able to generate code faster, but now what? Do you just skip testing? Or do you now wait weeks for your quality teams to catch up? That's not a great trade-off.
Right, and really kind of the risk tolerance that companies have always had to balance, the speed of release versus the downside of something going wrong gets exacerbated by this increase in velocity, right?
So this really puts teams, they face an unbearable trade-off, right? Are they really willing to risk the CX, the customer experience, in order to get a release out the door faster?
Yeah, as the velocity has increased, where you can think of kind of the software development lifecycle as a flow, and you had these gentle waves kind of lapping up against the quality task or the quality team of software as it was being developed by humans. Now those small waves have become a tsunami of code crashing up against that quality gate, and it just can't keep up. So you've created a downstream bottleneck that creates that exact business problem that you're talking about, where now I have to trade off all those velocity gains I've achieved by using AI code gen against the customer experience and the business risk of something going wrong, exactly straining the application integrity that you were talking about.
The thing that strikes me about this is quality teams were already sort of settling and somewhat dissatisfied with the fact that they had test coverage or functional coverage, somewhere between 20 and 30%. So isn't that now also exacerbated by this tsunami hitting the wall?
Yeah, it's much worse than it was previously. So everybody would love to test everything and test their application as completely as possible on all the different possible operating systems and devices and browsers that it needs to run on. And they couldn't do it before, and they really can't do it now. So if you've got 10 times more code, you can, coming that much more quickly, you can see that what was already a bit of a problem has become a serious problem.
When I hear from customers, like in our customer advisory board and in our case studies, in our interviews, the one thing I hear from the quality teams over and over is they never want to be the bottleneck. They never want to be the thing that stops releases or let's say slows releases from getting out the door. So what does this mean for quality teams today then?
It means they're going to have to find a way to adjust their pace, and there really are limited options. This is, in some respects, the industry's already decided that they're not just going to throw more people at the problem, hire endless armies of quality testers. They can't test everything because the test runs take too long. So we're going to need a technical solution. There's going to have to be a quality equivalent of AI code gen in order to keep pace.
So what does all of this mean for the very common approach of shift left in quality?
So shift left testing came about a long time ago. It was the notion is that the earlier you find an issue in software development, the cheaper it is to fix. And the way that was implemented, though, as is often the case with kind of breakthrough processes like Agile, is the implementation really varies company to company, and it's often poorly done. What it's really meant is that you ask the developers to do the testing, which is A, something they don't really like, and B, because they're operating at the code level, they only test the code.
Isn't that also more expensive?
To have developers do testing, they're certainly more expensive than QA people, yes.
Okay.
But they tend to be pretty good at automation, and there is a portion of the testing burden that should be done at the code level. Your unit testing, you can do some functional testing. What that really is going to tell you, though, is that your code is functional, your code is clean. It's not going to tell you that the application actually works for the end user, that it's achieving the end user experience that you want.
So can we dive in on this just a minute? I know one of the things we also hear is that these new code assistants, right, are also able to test the quality of code as they're shipping it.
Yes.
And while that seems great on the one hand, it also strikes me then you're totally missing checks and balances.
You are. And so a good analogy is to think about code review pre-AI gen. One person would write the code, and then a peer would review their code and check their work and point out.
Check and balance.
Yeah, it's a check and a balance. With AI code gen today, you can actually have a conversation with the AI. It can generate the spec. It then generates the code from the spec it wrote. It generates the tests from the code it wrote. It runs the tests and then tells you that it's passed the tests. And that is clearly a black box that you can't let run in an enterprise environment. You must have some kind of check and balance to validate, A, that the tests really have passed, that the tests are the right tests, and that the application works. So it's a growing problem that's been created by AI code gen. AI code gen's really accelerated the creation of code, and that has created some pretty extreme downstream effects. It's had a big impact on quality. It also has a broader connection to the idea of validation and intent validation. We've done some research on that. Can you share what we've learned from practitioners?
In our market research study that we published, Closing the AI Software Quality Gap, what we saw was that 60% of respondents say they have already experienced quality issues in the last year. And so, yes, a lot of the discussion is, oh my gosh, code is so much faster. And undeniably it is. But there's a different trajectory that we have to think about as well. So with these coding assistants, yes, speed has increased, but so has the abstraction of code. And as the speed and abstraction have gone up, what we are seeing is the integrity of applications is going down. And what that essentially creates is this escalating risk trajectory for businesses. And you mentioned intent validation, and we are definitely hearing this. It's like, okay, I used to build against a spec. I used to know exactly what the intent was that I am trying to validate. But when I am trying to test against a prompt, or it's literally a black box, how do you validate what that experience was intended to be from end to end?
Yeah, it's a genuine challenge that's not yet resolved. The idea that we used to have user stories to go to requirements, they'd go into technical specifications, functional specs for the engineers to build against, and then you'd create your code asset, and there was a very clear path that you could check between those and say, is this what was intended? And then, of course, test against user requirements. The abstraction that AI code gen creates is exactly as you said. At an extreme level, if it's just a prompt and it's not a very well-defined prompt, then you actually don't have a detailed specification.
What am I testing against?
What I'm intending to build and what I'm testing against. And so it becomes very hard then to say, well, is this good? And that's a new problem. This notion of drift from intent is a new problem that the industry is going to have to reckon with as it's using more AI code gen.
Well, Dan, this is why we've been talking so much about application integrity, which is this notion that you have continuous, measurable validation that your software works as intended with the governance to truly operate at AI speed and scale. Can you say a bit more about like practically what that means for a quality team?
Yeah, it means, first of all, you've got to keep up with the velocity. It means really being able to fully explore and understand the application that's been created, and enable people to validate, in this instance, through the tests that are created, that it's doing what you intended it to do. So it becomes a very important checkpoint where the tests themselves are the proof. These are the evidence. This is what the application does. We believe this is, the intent of the application, and that now becomes a very important record for the end user or the company that's developing the software to ensure that that's actually what they intended it to do. Is everything in there that's meant to be in there? Is nothing in there that's not meant to be in there? And so we think that that's going to be a very important contribution to that intent validation challenge that the industry is facing.
One of the things we learned from our research study was that more than 2/3 of the software quality practitioners that we surveyed believe that they will get either significant or dramatic improvement from autonomous testing. So I would love to dive into BearQ. What is the solution? How exactly does it work?
Well, they will get significant and dramatic improvement from autonomous testing with BearQ. BearQ is an autonomous system of agentic teammates that are always on. They will use your application the way a person would. They will understand it. They'll create the testing strategy and the tests, and they'll run the tests. Very, very importantly, it exposes everything it's doing so a human can be in the loop and read the tests in plain English.
So why autonomous QA though, instead of just more testers or more scripts?
Let's start with the testers. The market has already decided that it's not possible to keep throwing people at the problem. It's not affordable to add armies of manual testers, and it would just take too long to test everything that you want to test. So that's just not a practical solution to matching the velocity. Scripting and script-based testing it's kind of a broken paradigm already, and it's not fit for purpose for the AI SDLC, the era of the AI SDLC. You need a brand new approach, and the brittleness of tests, the fact that they don't adapt when the application changes, they need to be manually fixed and manually changed. They're not portable across form factors. Those are things that just won't survive at the velocity that we're going at. So BearQ is a completely different approach to solve this new problem. And it provides great human-facing capabilities, meaning the tests are just written in English. So they're very easily understandable by everybody. You don't need to learn a coding language to test your application. A human can interact with BearQ and guide it to where it would like more focus or less focus. And BearQ will adapt as your application adapts. So every time your application is updated, there's a new change, the agents within BearQ will re-explore that new application, learn the new functionality, and create the tests to support that new functionality. So a way to think of it is it's a force multiplier for your QA organization. It never sleeps. It's always learning. It's right on the work as soon as your application updates.
So probably not surprising then, market response to BearQ has been really exciting. I would love to dig in on what are you hearing from early customers?
Customer feedback's been incredibly positive. Users have found that BearQ uncovers bugs that they didn't even have coverage for almost immediately, and they think they have a mature test set already. It's uncovering useful bugs right away, which is kind of validation that it's testing intelligently and it really does understand their application. We've had absolute validation that it's that multiplier, that force multiplier for the QA team. We had one customer who said that BearQ was covering about 75% of the regression workload, and so it's a huge lift to what the QA team was able to do in life before BearQ.
AI has obviously disrupted the SDLC, and one of the things that has been interesting as we're talking to customers is that we are seeing it run the spectrum from, obviously a manual SDLC to AI augmented, where they're using tools like Copilot or Claude to accelerate development, all the way to fully autonomous. And the interesting thing is you can see all three flavors at play at once in a single organization based on the product line, the business unit, or the organization as a whole. And so I'm interested to understand, how does the introduction of BearQ play into this? And also, how does it support SmartBear's vision for autonomy?
I'll start with our vision for autonomy. We recently introduced a framework that we called levels of autonomy. And this is the quality analog to the coding spectrum of autonomy that you just described, from manual at level 1 through to fully autonomous at level 5. And this is what the industry needs. Wherever you are on that code gen, you need to be at least at the equivalent level of autonomy with your quality strategy in order to really get the velocity and quality benefits that companies need and companies want. SmartBear has this fantastic portfolio of products that span all the way across that spectrum, with BearQ being our new fully autonomous product at level 5.
I think what's exciting about this is essentially we're saying SmartBear has a solution to meet you wherever you are on this autonomy spectrum, including fully autonomous with BearQ. And essentially that means we can provide solutions so that you can do quality at AI speed and scale.
That's right.
Dan, as we see companies embrace or apply this new quality approaches, including embracing autonomous testing in the next several years, how do you see software development evolving?
Well, it's definitely going to get faster, even faster than it is today. And as coding accelerates and coding autonomy increases, QA autonomy has to increase as well. And as we see this ever accelerating creation of software and evolution of software that's being created, you will see QA evolving to continuous assurance that the application is working and it's working as intended. And that's really our goal with BearQ, to ensure that people can deliver their applications with speed and trust.
Right, which is the whole point of application integrity, right? To ensure that you have trusted software delivered at speed and a wonderful and not compromised user experience.
That's exactly right. Kelly, thank you very much for joining me today. I really enjoyed that conversation. It was great to talk about application integrity and to dive into a few of the details about BearQ. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Dan.